about being in Paris and stories of things that happened to me. And I found out that I had a voice and could write. And so it was fun actually taking those recipes and making them, accessible and fun for a home cook. I wrote it as if my nephews pull it off the shelf and we're going to start making recipes for the first time.
Yeah, this is so cool. I mean, I'm looking at your blog. Also, you probably learned some ways to write your blog from learning how to write the book. Like you said, they had specialists in food and recipe writing, some special buzzwords and some ways to describe how to knead the dough or to set the table or the prepare the pots or the ovens, things like that. I mean, this is just a very well done cookbook. I got to give you kudos on that, and that's really cool way to express your passion, right? And I want to rewind it a little bit more to saying it was years of people asking you, hey, Susan, when are you going to write a cookbook? When are you going to write a cookbook? When are you going to write a cookbook, right? You probably heard that question more than, hey, what'd you put in this recipe, right?
That's right. When are you going to write the book? The next question is, when are you going to be on TV? Well, I can say that's probably never.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
When are you going to write a cookbook was, it was a puzzle that I had to put together and figure out, first of all, what do I want to write about? What is the focus going to be? So I kind of threw the net pretty wide and made it classes. Because of my cooking classes, I had all these recipes that I had taught. And so it was my kind of way to give a cooking class to the world, basically, with all the classes that I had taught, putting them all together in a book.
I think that's awesome. And don't sell yourself short, right? Your book's on Amazon. You're on a radio show right now. Maybe one of the questions was asked, when are you going to be on the radio, Susan? You can check that one off. But,
that's right.
But TV should be your next spot. And I don't see why that wouldn't come to fruition with such an awesome cookbook and getting it out there to more people, right? You're local in Wisconsin, so really the only people that can see you in person and come to your cooking classes are people locally there. But now that you're on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com and we're going to talk about it in the third segment, taking the tours to France on the cooking schools and learning the culture of cooking because, French cooking, France is more or less the capital of cuisine in the world. It just has always been that way. I think that's really awesome for the fact that you're getting it out there. It's not just the people in your county or in your city or in the state of Wisconsin. You can share these recipes across the world. Now, have you had anyone reach back out to you that's bought your book or that you've run across that was in one of your classes that has said, hey, Susan, I tried that one recipe or I did this and it was so delicious. Do you get that type of feedback through your blog and people on the websites?
It's so wonderful. It's so wonderful. Every now and then I'll get someone who will write to me from my blog or they'll send me a note of, I tried this and I followed your instructions and I was able to make, one that I hear back a lot on is the cinnamon roll recipe. That they just, they'll do it as a family or they'll make it for a special occasion and they're just thrilled that they have these big fluffy cinnamon rolls. So it's a wonderful reward when people write back and let me know that things were successful.
Now let me ask you, and this is probably a tough question, it's like someone asking you what your favorite movie is. But what's your favorite recipe in this book?
Oh, Logan.
or how about you give me the top three?
I can tell you that there is
overwhelming response is the cinnamon roll.
That I love.
Which one?
It's the pear almond tart. And I'll tell you why I love it. That's a class that I teach a lot, and it really allows me to pass on a lot of the tradition in French pastries. And people are very, very successful with it. And actually the photo that accompanies it, I thought it was in the running for the cover of the book. And so that's one of my favorite desserts to serve here and one of my favorites to teach. So it's probably up there with one of my favorites.
Now the cinnamon rolls, that sounds like a fun one to put together some homemade cinnamon rolls for Christmas morning or Thanksgiving morning or something like that. Name one other recipe in here that is probably the reader's favorites other than the cinnamon roll, whether it's something that's easier or what do you think is the last one that you would say, all right, if you're going to go look at some recipes in my cookbook, cinnamon roll, pecan, and then what's the last one?
I would say the beef bourguignon. It's the beef, classic French beef stew. it's beautiful, it's delicious, it's classic French. Again, I love to teach it, I love to eat it, and it's a recipe that people could be very, very successful with.
Well, you said that, and Jake, our producer, got a big smile on his face and did the rubbing his belly circle motion because it must be something that he really enjoys. So we'll get you a copy of this book, Jake. You can try that recipe out at home. And again, to all the listeners out there, I definitely recommend you check this out. Susan's website itself is littlefrenchbakery.com. She's on Amazon. She's on Barnes & Noble. And what was the other big book website that you're on, Susan?
IndieBound.
IndieBound. Awesome. So we're talking about these recipes and cooking. Now, let me ask you this question. What has been your biggest disaster in the kitchen ever? There's a Seinfeld episode where George's dad, Frank, decides that he's going to cook this tainted beef for some people in the military, and they all get sick, and he has these bad nightmares about it. Have you ever one time just put too much salt or too much garlic or too much something into it and thought, holy cow, this is the worst thing I've ever tasted?
Oh, sure.
Cooking is trial and error, right? It is trial and error.
One of my dad's favorite desserts is it's a meringue. It's called Chamtort. Fill these little meringue cups. And so I thought, I'm going to make those for my dad. So my mom used to make them on a paper bag in the oven. Well, meringue, I didn't know this at the time, but meringue is very sensitive to moisture and all sorts of variables that can happen. Well, I made them. I went to present them to them, and we couldn't get them off the bag. They were just these gummy, pasty, sticky, awful meringues that looked more like kindergarten artwork than dessert. So that's up there with one of my biggest fails. But things happen from time to time, and luckily now I usually know what happens, and they come fewer and farther between, but it happens.
It does happen, and I like to cook. I'm going to consider myself an above-average cook, but I was not like that when I first started. I was in college having to call Mom and ask her how long I cook this or how much seasoning I put in that, and it's very much a trial and error process. And your own palate is different than what the next person likes, so you might critique curtail some of the recipes and put a little more garlic here, a little bit more sugar. My wife Haley, when she cooks, she tends to put way more chocolate and caramel and whipped cream and icing than it calls for. That's just kind of her palate. But I think that the cooking is certainly a trial and error process. It's not something that you read a cookbook and you can instantly say, okay, I can go cook some 5-star entrees. It's a trial and error process. And that's the same thing with life. You give it a shot. If it works, great. You keep going with it. If it doesn't, you go back to the drawing board and see what does. And again, this isn't an overnight thing. This started back in 1999 as far as potentially becoming a reality for you. But you've been doing this since you were a little kid. I love it. You guys stay tuned. We're going to come back here in our last segment. We're going to talk about some of the cooking classes that Susan does. And even the newest part of the Little French Bakery cookbook is taking the tours overseas to Paris to see it with your own eyes. Stay tuned. Thanks for listening to Lifeness.
You thought you found a friend to take you out of this place. Someone you could lend a hand in return for grace.
I'm here with the best mortgage guy in Arizona, Kelly McCurdy, talking about the truths and myths in short sales and foreclosures. Kelly, tell our listeners some good news.
Hey, Logan, we're so excited to announce that we can provide a client with an FHA mortgage 3 years after a foreclosure, 3 years after a short sale. And for our VA clients that proudly served our country, we can provide them with a mortgage 2 years after a short sale and 2 years after a foreclosure.
Wow, that's awesome. Give Kelly McCurdy a call, 602-615-4881. Again, 602-615-4881 to find out how, and tell him Logan sent you. All right, we are back in our last segment. And this is a fun, special show for me because Susan's a really great lady. Her and Gary are some good people. They're some of my wife's parents, Dale and Kathy, some of their best friends, and Dale and Kathy are good people. Just funny how good people kind of link up with good people, and it's been a fortune to know you guys now. I've been with Haley for 8 to 9, 7.5, 8 years. I better know that one. I hope she doesn't bust me on that when I get home tonight, Susan. So anyways, it's been awesome to have you on. We've talked about how you were able to follow your passion as a young girl, starting off baking, doing it through brownies and Girl Scouts, getting the badges, sitting with your girlfriends in college on a Thursday night, baking up some cinnamon rolls and what have you. We were talking about the trial and error process of cooking, and then that kind of takes us to the next step of the business side of what you're doing. And when we were talking earlier this morning that when you have a passion and you follow it and you do it well, the business side kind of comes along with it, right? You didn't seek out to learn how to cook to primarily have cooking classes. I think it was more of a passion for you, but then people see and taste your food, and one of those questions next to when are you writing a cookbook, Susan, is probably when are you starting your cooking classes, right?
That's right. That's exactly what happened. We turned a 4-car garage into a licensed commercial kitchen, and about, I'd say 18 months or 2 years in, it seemed pretty clear that I needed to start teaching. I'd always loved to teach. In fact, I taught a lot with Kathy, Haley's mom. And so we did another little renovation to add a dining room and a bathroom and the facilities needed for teaching. And that's probably my favorite part. And I love doing wedding cakes, and I loved the, special event preparations. But to bring, 6, 8 people in and spend the day with them and kind of just enjoy the company of baking is wonderful.
Well, you get to share your passion and something that you've been learning your entire life, and to be a expert or a resource to have people say, hey, Susan, I tasted your cake, or I've had your cinnamon rolls, or I've had this or that. I want to know how to do it, and I want to know how to do some other recipes. I mean, what better gratification can you get than that, as far as, hey, I put out some good stuff, and I got some people who want to learn how to do it as well. That's pretty cool, Susan.
It's really fun. It's really fun. I've got people who come back, once a year and spend the day, and we just keep increasing their repertoire of recipes. And, I learn from them, and they learn from me.
Certainly. And you mentioned some team building, corporate events, and what a better great way to build some camaraderie and some synergy amongst your employees and go learn how to cook and learning the different recipes. And in the book, you also talk about some of the different pots and pans that you use for certain recipes, and in the back it's got the metric conversions and some of the terms that you use in cooking. I think that that's an important basis and foundation that people that want to take it to that next level, that aren't just the hamburger helper and macaroni and cheese type of people, that really want to put some custom meals together. What a great way to do that. We actually have been through a cooking class. Haley's sister Dana got us a cooking class for Christmas one year, and her and her husband Bob, Haley and I went to a cooking class out here in Scottsdale one evening, and we had a blast. And just the fun that we had, and sitting there learning, and then getting to try it yourself, and then tasting your finished product. We could have done a little bit better on the crepes. I know that that's kind of an art as far as getting them perfect and getting them not to stick, but classes, that's what you need, are classes and classes to learn and learn. And now, an extension of this, I want you to share with our listeners the newest addition to your repertoire, if you will. Not only have you got the book and the cooking classes in your awesome commercial kitchen, you're now starting cooking tours. Share with our listeners a little bit more about that. That's so exciting.
It is. It's so exciting. I've partnered with Burkhalter Travel here in the Madison, Wisconsin area, and one of the things that people have asked me, and I've actually, on my website, it's called Susan's Paris Notebook, and it's a list of the places that I love to go when I get to Paris, the places that I stay, sort of the ins and outs of how to be a good Paris tourist. And they came to me and they said, we'd like to take that list and turn it into a tour with you. Would you be a host? And so they put the travel arrangements together using all of my favorite places, and then I'll join the tour and sort of accompany the guests as we go to the Cordon Bleu for a demo. One of the chefs takes us to the French markets. We eat in my favorite restaurants, and to kind of, no pun intended, put the icing on the cake, we'll actually go into the cookware stores and the ingredient stores where I shop, and people will be able to pick up equipment and things with me accompanying them.
That's really awesome. I did also want to mention a few things. One, you gave Haley and I an amazing wedding present, which is one of your favorite, I think, pots to cook with, a Staub pot. And we since then have gifted that to some of our family and friends.